Think about that first sip of coffee in the morning.
Yeah.
Seems simple, right? But that single bean has been on this, well, incredible journey.
Uh-huh. From a tiny seed somewhere far away.
Exactly. From a hillside right into your cup. So today we're doing a deep dive into that whole journey. We're using the material you shared with us.
Right? We've got that 10 Steps to Coffee guide.
Yeah, that plus some really interesting bits about the wider coffee industry
Yeah,
and even McDonald's back in '96.
that's right. Yeah, it gives some broader context.
So our mission basically is to unpack this whole process, figure out the key steps, maybe find some surprising details along the way about our daily brew.
It really is remarkable when you think about it, the scale, the complexity.
Mm-hmm.
For something we often just take for granted, it's truly global, millions of people, different continents, all for that cup.
Okay, so let's start right at the very beginning, the birth of the bean.
Right.
It's still wild to me that the stuff we grind up starts as an actual seed, a seed you can plant.
Absolutely. And that 10 Steps document, it lays out this nursery phase. It's very deliberate.
Not just random scattering.
No, no. They start in shaded beds, then they get moved carefully into individual pots. Ah, okay. With special soil mixes. It's like giving each little plant its own personalized start.
A little VIP treatment for the coffee seedlings, and all that watering and shading.
Yeah,
Sounds quite nurturing.
it is. They need that consistent care. And it makes total sense they plant during the wet season.
Right, for the soil moisture, get those roots established.
Exactly. And you see right from this early stage how much it all depends on nature.
Climate, rainfall.
Yeah, sun, water, it all has knock-on effects down the line.
Okay, so fast forward, what, 3 or 4 years?
About that, yeah. For the trees to mature and actually bear fruit, the coffee cherries.
That's quite a wait, real long-term commitment for the farmers.
It is. And those ripe cherries, they're this bright, deep red color. Very different from the brown beans we know.
So how do they get them off the tree? Harvesting.
Well, there are two main ways, according to the source.
Yeah.
Strip picking. Yeah, where they basically pull everything off the branch at once.
Mhm.
Hand or machine. More efficient, especially somewhere like Brazil, where they can use machines.
Okay.
But then there's selective picking. This is for the finer Arabica beans, usually.
Ah, the fancy stuff.
Sort of, yeah. Pickers go through and only take the perfectly ripe cherries
Oh.
by hand.
Wow.
And they have to go back to the same trees every, 8 to 10 days.
That sounds incredibly labor-intensive.
Yeah.
And costly, I imagine.
It is more costly,
Right.
but that's a big part of what defines specialty coffee quality, right? That link between intense labor and the final product.
That attention to detail is amazing. And I saw that note about Colombia having 2 harvests.
Yeah, that's interesting, isn't it? Most places have one main harvest, but Colombia has 2 flowering, so they get a main and a secondary crop. Big deal economically for them.
Definitely. And what about the pickers? How much do they actually gather?
The document says a good picker might manage 100 to 200 pounds of cherries a day.
Okay.
But remember, that only translates to about 20 to 40 pounds of actual coffee beans in the end.
Oh, wow. That's a huge difference.
It is. And then they get weighed, the pickers get paid, and the cherries have to be moved really quickly to the processing plant.
Right. You can't let them spoil. Which brings us neatly to processing.
Exactly. A real race against time here.
And again, 2 main methods popped out. Dry and wet.
Uh-huh. The dry method is pretty much what it sounds like.
Just dry them in the sun?
Basically, yeah. Spread the cherries out on big patios or tables. Sun-dried. It takes several weeks, though.
Weeks? Wow. Very weather dependent then.
Totally. Used a lot where water is scarce. They have to rake and turn them constantly during the day, cover them at night, or if it rains.
Sounds like hard work.
It is. The goal is to get the moisture content down to about 11%. That's key for storage.
11%. Got it. Okay, what about the wet method? Sounds more complex.
It is more involved, yeah. First, they pulp the cherries using a machine.
Pulping, so removing the skin and fruit part.
Exactly. Separating the skin and pulp from the bean inside. That pulp often gets used as mulch, by the way.
Oh, neat. Recycling.
Then the beans go into water channels. And here's a clever bit, they separate by weight. Lighter, maybe less ripe beans float.
And the heavier, denser, better ones sink?
Precisely. Then they often sort by size, too, using these big rotating drums with different sized holes.
Okay, a multi-stage sorting process.
And then comes fermentation. The beans sit in these large water-filled tanks for maybe 12 to 48 hours.
Fermenting, why do they do that?
It's all about removing that last layer of sticky stuff around the bean. It's called mucilage or parenchyma. Natural enzymes in the water break it down.
Huh, so it's a biological process.
Yeah, and apparently you can tell it's done when the beans go from feeling slick to kind of rough.
Interesting tactile cue.
Then they get a final rinse.
So whether it was the dry method from the start or this wet method ending with fermentation and rinsing, the next step is drying again.
Well, for the wet processed beans, yes. They still need to be dried down to that magic 11% moisture level.
Right. Same target.
Same target. They might sun-dry them on tables or patios like the dry method cherries, or use big mechanical dryers like tumblers. Depends on the scale and resources.
Okay. And these dried beans, they still have a layer on them.
Yes, they're still inside a parchment layer, the endocarp. At this stage, it's called parchment coffee.
Parchment coffee. Okay.
And that's how they're often stored and transported initially, in those jute or settle bags we associate with coffee. It protects the bean.
Gotcha. So next stop, milling. This happens just before they get exported, right?
Typically, yes. Milling is about getting that parchment layer off.
That's called hulling.
Hulling, yes. For wet processed coffee, it's removing the parchment. For dry processed coffee, they remove the entire dried husk, skin, pulp, parchment, all in one go.
Okay. And polishing, I saw that's optional.
It is. It removes any last bits of a thin layer called the silver skin. But the source says it makes very little actual difference to the taste. More about appearance.
So maybe not worth the effort unless you want shiny beans.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
The really crucial part here is grading and sorting.
Yeah, more quality control.
Intense quality control. Sorting by size, very precisely. They use screens with specific hole sizes. The scale goes from 10 to 20 in 64ths of an inch.
Wow, that's specific.
It is. Then they use air jets, pneumatic sorting, to separate by density. Heavier beans versus lighter ones.
Clever.
And then critically, removing defective beans, beans that are the wrong size or color, over-fermented, insect-damaged, maybe still unhulled.
By machine or by hand?
Both. Often machines do a first pass, but sometimes hand sorting is needed for that final, really high-quality check. They want only the best beans moving forward.
It's just incredible the scrutiny these little beans face.
It really is. And once they pass all that, then they're called green coffee.
Finally.
Yeah.
Green coffee. Ready for export.
Ready for export. Shipped in those jute or sizzle bags, or sometimes bulk in big plastic-lined containers.
And the scale is mind-blowing. What was it, 7 million tons a year globally?
Around that, yeah. It's a massive global trade. This is where it really becomes a commodity shipped worldwide.
But wait, before they even leave, there's tasting, right? Cupping.
Yes. Absolutely crucial. Cupping. It happens repeatedly, actually, checking quality all along. But definitely before export.
It sounds very formal, like wine tasting.
It is very much like wine tasting in its rigor. Highly standardized. It's not just a casual sip.
So what do?
Well, first, a visual check of the green beans. Then they roast a small sample right there in a lab roaster.
Okay.
Grind it immediately, pour carefully controlled hot water over it. Then the nosing, smelling the aroma deeply.
Right.
Then they break the crust, push aside the floating grounds, and smell again. Intense aroma there. And finally, the tasting. It involves this distinctive, loud slurp.
A slurp?
Yeah. The idea is to spray the coffee across your entire palate, really taste it fully. They weigh their feel of it in their mouth, analyze the flavors, then spit it out.
Spit it out, like wine tasters.
Exactly. Professional cuppers taste hundreds of samples a day sometimes. They can't swallow it all.
Wow. Hundreds. And what are they looking for?
Everything. Specific characteristics, acidity, body, flavor notes, any flaws or defects, how suitable it might be for blending, and what the best way to roast that particular bean might be.
So they're like the ultimate quality gatekeepers and profilers.
Absolutely. It ensures standards are met before those beans travel thousands of miles.
Incredible dedication. Okay, so the green beans finally arrive in the importing country. Now for the roasting.
Yes. This is the transformation we recognize. Green to brown.
And that gets hot, right?
Oh, yeah. Around 550 degrees Fahrenheit, typically. About 288 Celsius. The beans had to get moved constantly in the roaster, tumbling so they don't burn. Inside the bean, the temperature hits about 400 Fahrenheit, maybe 200 Celsius. That's when they turn brown, and the oils, the caffeols, start to come out.
And that's what creates the flavor.
That's the heart of it. It's a chemical process called pyrolysis. Heat breaking down sugars and acids, creating hundreds, thousands of new aroma and flavor compounds. That's the magic of roasting.
Pyrolysis, okay.
And just as important as heating is the cooling. As soon as they reach the perfect roast level, they have to be cooled down fast with air or sometimes a water quench to stop the roasting process right there.
Precision timing. And it makes sense to roast in the importing country, doesn't it? For freshness.
Exactly. Roasted coffee stales much faster than green coffee. So roasting closer to the consumer is key.
Okay, nearly there. Grinding. Seems simple, but...
But important. The whole point is to increase the surface area so hot water can extract the flavor efficiently.
And the grind size depends on how you're brewing it.
Totally. Super fine, almost powder, for espresso. Much coarser for a French press or drip coffee. Finer grinds need quicker brewing. Coarser ones need longer.
Makes sense. Maximize that flavor extraction.
That's the goal.
And then,
Yeah.
finally, brewing. The end of the line for the bean. The start of the enjoyment for us.
The culmination of that incredible journey, the 10 steps documented, and that nice reminder, didn't it?
Yeah, to just appreciate the whole process, all the people involved.
It really changes how you see your morning cup when you think about it all.
Absolutely. Which kind of leads us perfectly into those broader insights from the other documents you shared. The scale is just, wow. 9 billion pounds consumed globally each year.
Staggering, isn't it? And over 130 million coffee drinkers just in the U.S.
And that commodity chain, it's complex.
Very. You've got the producers, often small farmers, then those middlemen, the coyotes.
Who sometimes exploit the farmers, right? Offering
Right.
low prices.
Unfortunately, yes, that's often the case according to the source. Then exporters, importers, roasters, retailers. It's a long chain.
And the sheer number of people involved in just growing it. 20 million families, 50 countries, 11 million hectares of land.
It's massive. And mostly those two main species. Arabica, the higher grade one, about 70%.
Mostly from Latin America.
About 80% of Arabica, yeah. And then Robusta, mainly Africa and Asia.
And the document mentioned the big estates often bypass the middlemen.
Right, the large estate owners often process and export directly, getting prices linked to the New York Coffee Exchange. A very different situation from the smallholders.
Yeah, highlights the power imbalances. And those wages mentioned? 2 to 3 thirds a day. Tough conditions.
It's a sobering aspect, definitely. Important context for the coffee we drink.
Then the importers play a big role too, don't they? Especially for smaller roasters.
Hugely important. Roasters, especially smaller ones, often don't have the capital or connections to buy directly from origins all over the world.
So importers buy huge amounts.
Yeah, large quantities, then they break it down and sell smaller lots to the hundreds of roasters. They have a lot of influence on what green coffee is actually available in the market.
And looking at the U.S. roasting scene back in '96, over 500 roasters then?
Yeah, but dominated volume-wise by the big three, Kraft, P&G, Nestle. They handled something like 60% of the green beans.
Wow. But you also had the rise of the micro roasters then, focusing on specialty coffee.
Exactly. And it mentioned roasters generally had the highest profit margin in that chain.
Interesting. And that trend of retailers roasting their own beans, that started way back then.
Seems like it. And those projections from the Specialty Coffee Association, 10,000 retail outlets in the U.S. and Canada by '99. A lot of coffee bars and cafes.
Yeah.
Shows that shift in culture.
Definitely the rise of cafe culture. Okay, let's connect this to McDonald's in 1996, a fascinating snapshot.
It really is. McDonald's as this behemoth in the U.S. economy,
Mhm.
recognizing these changing tastes potentially.
Yeah, their whole image. Family restaurant, Ronald McDonald, the Golden Arches. Iconic.
And known for that standardization, speed, consistency,
Yeah.
and that incredibly efficient supply chain.
1 in 8 U.S. workers employed by them at some point. That's incredible.
Astonishing. And expanding so fast globally, 2,000 stores a year, largest owner of retail property.
And profitable through sheer volume, right?
Yeah.
Even with lower margins.
Exactly. Biggest buyer of beef, poultry, potatoes. Even worked with farmers on new breeds, like for McNuggets.
Wow. And they had their own trained agents sourcing directly from farmers.
Yeah, sophisticated procurement. Huge investments in storage, transport.
Massive advertising spend, too, targeting kids.
Right. And while Coke was their main drink, the sources suggest they were recognizing that coffee was becoming more important to consumers.
A shift they couldn't really ignore.
Likely not. With that global presence, mostly franchises, all trained at McDonald's University on quality, speed, consistency.
It's a machine.
A very efficient one. And those 1996 financials. Over $10 billion in revenue. Seeing the breakdown between company-owned and franchise stores gives a sense of that massive scale.
Yeah, the operating income, the margins.
Yeah.
It all paints a picture of this giant thinking about its next move, possibly in coffee.
It's fascinating to place them in that context of the growing coffee market at the time.
Okay, so wrapping this up, what a journey for that bean.
Truly remarkable. Seed, nursery, cherry, harvest, processing, dry or wet, that whole complex path.
Drying, milling, all that grading and sorting.
The cupping. Don't forget the cupping.
Right. The expert tasting. Then export, roasting, grinding, brewing.
It's global. It's intricate. It involves so many hands.
What stands out most for you from all this?
For me, it's probably the sheer human element at every single stage, from farmers to pickers to cuppers, and the complex economic web behind it all.
Yeah, I agree. I think for me, learning about the details of selective picking and that fermentation step,
Yeah.
those are real eye-openers.
Uh-huh.
And just seeing the scale of McDonald's back then provides such a backdrop for how the coffee market has evolved.
Hopefully, this whole exploration of the sources gives a much richer picture of that everyday cup.
Definitely. So maybe the next time you pour that coffee, just take a second, think about that incredible journey, all those people,
Yeah, what new appreciation might you have?
or maybe what part of it makes you want to learn even more. It's certainly given me a whole new perspective on my morning ritual.